12 people, they were experts on Iran, were they not?
I don't believe so.
They worked in counterintelligence, did they not?
I'm taking you at your word, sir. I'm not familiar with every
You're the
single
chief
word.
director. I'm not. You should know the answer. You fired the people. Where did they work?
People were terminated for violating their ethical obligations and the high standards that
Was the
we
ethical
have.
violations that they dealt with the case of the classified documents that were found in the bathroom in Mar-a-Lago, was that the ethical issue?
As I said earlier, all those matters are pending litigation, so I'm not going to comment on it.
What happened inside the FBI over the past few months is one of those stories that sounds too reckless to be true until you read the court filings. This is not about left versus right. It is about whether the people running America's top law enforcement agency are making decisions to protect the country or to protect one man. Late February 2026. Inside the FBI's Washington field office, there is an elite counterintelligence unit called CI-12. These are the agents who track foreign spies on American soil, monitor assassination plots, and keep tabs on Iranian intelligence networks that have been trying to kill former U.S. officials for years. This unit was critical after the 2020 drone strike that killed Iranian General Qasem Soleimani when Iran started sending operatives to target Americans in retaliation.
So my specific question is that there was a report that came out in February from CNN that the FBI had let go or fired dozens of agents and staff members from a counterintelligence unit tasked with monitoring Iran. And apparently the reason, at least reported in the press, was that these individuals had been involved in the investigation of classified document handling from President Trump at Mar-a-Lago.
This was the reason why they were summarily let go. First of all, are you aware of those firings, and do you concur with the rationale or reason for those firings?
I'm aware of that, and I know there's a pendency of litigation, so I'm not able to comment on them.
Did you yourself order those firings?
The FBI, every time there is someone who violates our code of conduct or ethical standard, conducts an internal investigation with the careers there, and they present a decision point to me. The Iranian Threat Mission Center has seen an increase of 43% in arrests for Iranian spy actors. So the Iranian Threat Mission Center has never been stronger.
So I am not asking about that. I am asking about whether those people were fired because they were involved in the investigation of the document handling
By President Trump, not for any behavior issues. Is that your understanding as well?
Again, ma'am, I can't comment on them because those are in pending litigation.
I guess I'm a little stymied here, Director, because it feels as though literally when there was a possible pending war, I'm outside of this intelligence circle in many ways, even though I serve on the Intelligence Committee. You collectively must have been aware when these firings happened that there was a meaningful chance that the U.S. might be engaged with a war in Iran. And having these very expert, super qualified folks summarily dismissed at this time, it just feels like an odd choice in timing. Were you aware at the time that this was going down, that this may end up weakening the mission and the readiness of that group?
The mission, as I stated, has never been stronger when you see a 43% increase in counterintelligence arrests and 21% increase in cyber arrests against the Iranian Threat Mission Center. My focus is on providing the American people the strongest FBI as possible. I don't work on timelines. I work on evidence that's presented to me.
I guess my concern is that it feels as though, and I very much honor the tone and tenor of this hearing, that this is about making sure that that we depoliticize what is the most important thing that we all do, which is keep us safe. And it feels as though this issue is a political issue. And I just am worried that we are taking really good, really qualified people and picking fights with one another across party lines.
FBI Director Kash Patel fired roughly a dozen of them. Look at that timeline. The intelligence community is ramping up. The Pentagon is moving assets into position. Threat assessments are being updated daily. And right then, the director of the FBI decides to remove the unit whose entire purpose is to detect and disrupt Iranian threats on American soil. The strikes killed Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, and plunged the entire region into a sprawling conflict. This was not a slow news week. So why did Patel do it? They did not fail at their jobs, they did not pose a security risk, and they did not violate any policy. They were fired because at some earlier point in their careers they had been assigned to the investigation into classified documents found at Donald Trump's Mar-a-Lago estate. That was the offense. The country was days away from war with Iran, and the FBI director decided the best use of his time was removing the unit designed to protect Americans from Iranian retaliation. According to reporting from NBC News, Patel specifically targeted CI-12 after discovering that his own phone records, along with those of White House Chief of Staff Susie Wiles, had been subpoenaed by the FBI during the original classified documents probe years earlier. So this was not some routine personnel review. Multiple sources described it as a retaliatory operation. Patel then had to sit in front of Congress and answer for it. On March 19, 2026, Patel appeared before the House Select Committee on Intelligence. Democratic Representative Steve Cohen from Tennessee asked him a straightforward question. When did you know the United States was going to invade Iran? Patel tried to dodge at first, saying he would prefer to discuss the details in a classified setting, but Cohen kept pressing. Was it 2 days before? 3 days? A week? Patel eventually conceded that he had advanced knowledge sometime before the operation, and when pushed further, it became clear he knew more than a month ahead of time. As the New Republic reported, Cohen then asked the obvious follow-up. With that knowledge, why on earth did you fire at least a dozen agents from the counterintelligence unit that specializes in Iran? Director, in the shutdown we are in now with Homeland Security, I believe you said this would be harmful to America because of the threat from Iran. Is that correct? Do I recall that correctly?
How many days before we invaded Iran did you know we were going to launch an invasion?
We can get into those details in a classified setting, but I work with my colleagues across the spectrum here to give me advance warning so that we can reinforce.
Was it 2 days, 3 days, a month?
It was sometime before that, sir.
Sometime before that. So you had not. With that knowledge, why did you fire at least a dozen agents in Counterintelligence Unit 12 that specializes in Iran counterintelligence, which makes us much less secure and safe with this war going on from Iranian attacks potentially against our country?
As I said earlier, Congressman, I don't work on timelines when these terminations occur. There are internal investigations conducted by the careers at the FBI that highlight unethical or inappropriate conduct, and it's up to me to make the decision. But our Iran Threats Mission Center has never been more resourced, as I've highlighted, a 43% increase in counter-espionage arrests from Iran alone, and 360 ongoing terrorism investigations with Iran-affiliated individuals.
And the people you fired, those 12 people, they were experts on Iran, were they not?
I don't believe so.
They worked in counterintelligence, did they not?
I'm taking you at your word, sir. I'm not familiar with every
You're the
single
chief
word.
director. I'm not. You should know the answer. You fired the people. Where did they work?
People were terminated for violating their ethical obligations and the high standards that
Was the
we
ethical
have.
violations that they dealt with the case of the classified documents that were found at the bathroom in Mar-a-Lago, was that the ethical issue?
As I said earlier, all those matters are pending litigation, so I'm not going to comment on them.
Patel's answer was basically a scrilllier, all those matters are in pending litigation, so I am not going to comment on them. Patel's answer was basically a script he had been rehearsed. He then pivoted to statistics, claiming the FBI's Iran Threat Mission Center had never been stronger, citing a 43% increase in counterintelligence arrests and 360 ongoing terrorism investigations related to Iran. Regardless of the question, regardless of the context, he kept returning to that same phrase, but Cohen was not buying any of it. He pointed out the obvious contradiction. You are telling me the mission is stronger than ever, and yet you just fired the specialists who were critical to that mission. How does that math work? He asked Patel directly whether the 12 fired individuals were experts on Iran. And Patel, the director of the FBI, the man who personally ordered these terminations, said he did not believe they were. Cohen pushed back immediately, pointing out that they worked in counterintelligence, specifically on cases related to Iran. Patel said he was taking the congressman's word for it. Think about that. The head of the FBI claims he does not even know the professional backgrounds of the people he personally decided to fire. Cohen then asked about the specific ethical violations. What exactly did these agents do wrong? Patel repeated his line about conduct standards, so Cohen went straight to the point. Was the ethical violation about the classified documents found in a bathroom at Mar-a-Lago? And that is when Patel shut down completely, hiding behind what he called pending litigation. The irony of that pending litigation defense is thick. He is not wrong that lawsuits exist, except he is the one being sued. In March of 2026, two former FBI special agents identified only as John Doe 1 and John Doe 2 to protect their identities filed a federal lawsuit naming Kash Patel and Attorney General Pam Bondi as defendants. According to the complaint reported by NBC News, these agents alleged their firings violated both their First Amendment rights because they were punished for perceived political beliefs and their Fifth Amendment rights because they were denied any form of due process. They got no hearing, no internal investigation, and no advance notice, just a phone call and a locked door. The court filing has some significant details. John Doe 1 was getting ready to take his two kids trick-or-treating on Halloween when he got a call ordering him to report to the Washington field office. That was it. He was done. He had been working fraud investigations at the time, and according to the lawsuit, he was given no opportunity to transition his active cases to other agents. John Doe 2 had graduated from the FBI Academy in 2018 and played a supporting role in the Trump investigation. He was not even one of the lead agents. He had moved on to a unit focused on local D.C. election corruption and was training for an FBI SWAT role. The lawsuit actually includes this detail. At one point, Patel saw John Doe 2 working out at the FBI headquarters gym on a holiday and gave him a fist bump. Months later, he fired him. Those two agents filed anonymously. But on March 31st, three agents who were willing to attach their real names to the fight stepped forward. Jamie Galliano, Blair Tolman, and Michelle Ball, all former members of the FBI's Washington Field Office Public Corruption Team, filed a class action lawsuit in federal court in Washington, D.C. PBS reported that the suit seeks to represent a class of at least 50 former agents who were terminated under similar circumstances since January 20th, 2025. That is not a few disgruntled employees. That is a systematic purge. Their complaint directly quotes the language that Patel and Bondi use publicly. According to CBS News, the filing alleges that Patel and Bondi embarked on what it calls a public campaign to oust plaintiffs from federal service because defendants perceived them to be political opponents, as if fidelity to the law and the proper execution of assignments were somehow hostile partisan acts. The suit describes the mission, in the defendant's own words, as retribution. But these two lawsuits were not even the first. Back in September of 2025, former acting FBI Director Brian Driscoll, along with two other senior officials, Stephen Jensen and Spencer Evans, sued Patel and Bondi. Axios obtained Driscoll's complaint, which contains an allegation that should make everyone in the current administration uncomfortable. Driscoll claims that Patel told him directly that he had to remove agents because his ability to keep his own job depended on getting rid of the people who had worked on cases involving the president. So, according to the man who was running the FBI before Patel took over, the firings were not about ethics. They were not about standards. They were about self-preservation. That is what a former acting FBI director is willing to put his name on in a federal court document. Every single one of these lawsuits makes the same core argument. Loyalty to Donald Trump is not and has never been a legal requirement for employment at the FBI. Firing agents for investigating a sitting or former president when those investigations were lawfully authorized and conducted through proper channels crosses a constitutional line. And a federal courtroom is very different from a congressional hearing. In Congress, you can dodge questions. You can cite pending litigation. You can repeat talking points. You can look at a congressman and say, I will take your word for it, when asked about people you personally fired. None of that works in federal court. In federal court, there is discovery, which means the plaintiff's attorneys can demand internal emails, text messages, termination orders, and any communication between Patel, Bondi, and the White House about these firings. There are depositions under oath where evasive non-answers get you held in contempt, and there are consequences for providing false testimony that go beyond a bad news cycle. This is why these lawsuits matter more than any congressional hearing ever could. Congress can embarrass you. Federal court can compel you. The FBI Agents Association, which represents thousands of current and former agents, publicly opposed Patel's firings at the time. CNN published the statement which warned that these actions weaken the Bureau by stripping away critical expertise and destabilizing the workforce, undermining trust in leadership and jeopardizing the Bureau's ability to meet its recruitment goals, ultimately putting the nation at greater risk. That is not some political advocacy group. That is the professional organization that represents the people doing the work. CI-12 is just one unit. The damage is much wider than that. CNN reported that many offices in the Department of Justice's National Security Division, including the Counterterrorism Office, have lost at least half of their employees through a combination of firings and resignations since the start of the current administration. One former senior DOJ official put it bluntly to CNN. If you lose half your capacity, you lose half your ability. That in itself is a reason to be concerned. The New Republic reported that nearly half of all working FBI agents had been reassigned to immigration enforcement, including those working in counterterrorism. So not only are specialized units being reduced, but the agents who remain are being pulled away from national security work entirely, and the dismantling goes deeper than firings. CNN reported that Attorney General Bondi published a series of memos on her very first day that paused all investigations into corporate foreign bribery, curtailed enforcement of the Foreign Agents Registration Act, and de-emphasized criminal prosecutions of Russian intelligence activities. Every enforcement mechanism designed to catch foreign threats was being weakened at once. The former head of the FBI's Directorate of Intelligence, Tanya Ugaretz, told the New York Times in a recent interview that almost immediately after Patel took over, there was a pattern of making decisions first and then having everyone scramble to figure out how to make them work afterward. That is not how you run a national security agency. You do not fire first and figure out the consequences later, not when 330 million people are counting on you to keep them safe. Michael Anderson, president of the Society of Former Special Agents of the FBI, issued a statement to the New York Sun, calling the dismissals deeply alarming, saying they seriously undermine the FBI workforce in addressing the significant and ever-increasing threats our nation faces today. Now let us talk about the other name on these lawsuits, Pam Bondi. Bondi served as Attorney General until Trump fired her in early April of 2026. The exact reason was never fully clarified, but her departure coincided with mounting pressure over another scandal entirely, the Jeffrey Epstein files. Some background on this. When Bondi first took over the DOJ, she actually led the charge in promising to publish Department of Justice documents related to the Epstein investigation. That sounded promising. Transparency, accountability, finally getting answers about the disgraced financier and the high-profile names in his orbit. But then something changed. According to reporting from The Hill, the DOJ later reversed course and said it would not make the files public on its own. It took an act of Congress, literally a law passed by both chambers, to force the Department of Justice to begin producing documents. And even then, the process was messy, with Democrats accusing Bondi of overseeing a cover-up and walking out of a closed-door briefing after she allegedly refused to answer key questions or commit to full transparency. During a House Judiciary Committee hearing in February, Bondi dismissed the bipartisan scrutiny of the Epstein files as a distraction from the administration's accomplishments. That did not sit well with lawmakers on either side of the aisle. So the House Oversight Committee voted on a bipartisan basis to subpoena Bondi regarding the DOJ's handling of the Epstein investigation. That vote included not just every Democrat on the panel, but also Republican representatives Nancy Mace, Tim Burchett, Michael Cloud, Lauren Boebert, and Scott Perry. Axios reported the subpoena was issued in March while Bondi was still serving as Attorney General. She was scheduled to appear for a deposition on April 14th. She did not show up. The Department of Justice argued that the subpoena no longer applied because Bondi was no longer Attorney General. But as Ranking Member Robert Garcia pointed out in a statement reported by the House Oversight Democrats, the subpoena was issued to Pam Bondi as an individual, not just to whoever held the title. It was binding working regardless of her employment status. Representative Nancy Mace, the Republican who originally pushed for the subpoena, agreed. The Hill reported that Mace said Bondi was subpoenaed specifically and that if she continued to refuse compliance, she should be held in contempt. This is someone who is also named as a co-defendant in the FBI agent's lawsuits. According to the PBS reporting on the class action filing, the complaint specifically notes that Bondi was personally involved as an attorney in some of Trump's legal troubles, having served on his legal team during his first impeachment trial. Patel, meanwhile, had his own phone records subpoenaed as part of a federal grand jury investigating the Mar-a-Lago documents. So both of the people deciding who gets fired from the FBI had personal stakes in the very investigations those agents worked on. The lawsuit alleges that once Patel and Bondi got appointed to the top of federal law enforcement, they abused those positions to claim victories that had eluded them on the merits. Bondi's intent was not exactly hidden either. In a March 2025 interview on Fox News, while she was still Attorney General, Bondi stated that there were a lot of people in the FBI and also in the Department of Justice who despise Donald Trump, despise us, and do not want to be here. And then she went further. Right now, we are going to root them out. We will find them and they will no longer be employed. That quote is now part of the court record. The agent's attorneys cited it as evidence of the retaliatory intent behind the firings. When you tell the country on national television that you are going to remove people from the FBI based on their perceived political loyalty and then you actually do it, that becomes Exhibit A. Democratic Representative Summer Lee had previously introduced articles of impeachment against Bondi while she was still in office, citing her defiance of congressional subpoenas, her handling of the Epstein files, and what Lee described as weaponizing the DOJ. According to her official statement, Lee called Bondi's refusal to appear the second subpoena Pam Bondi is in noncompliance with. Step back and notice what connects the FBI purge and the Epstein cover-up allegations. Same people, Patel and Bondi, both defendants in federal lawsuits alleging political retribution, both accused of prioritizing loyalty over the law, and both on the record in court filings that are not going away. To understand why losing CI-12 is such a problem, look at what happened the last time the United States took aggressive military action against Iran. After the Soleimani strike in 2020, CI-12 was the unit tracking Iranian retaliation plots inside the United States, and these were not theoretical threats. CNN reported that Iran-backed actors were subsequently charged with plots to assassinate American officials, including Trump himself, former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, and former National Security Advisor John Bolton. We are talking about real operational assassination plots on U.S. soil. A joint FBI and Department of Homeland Security report from August of 2025, obtained by CNN, described Iran's security services as adaptable and opportunistic, outlining how the regime recruited operatives whose identities would obscure Iranian involvement, using code words, burner phones, and cryptocurrency. They recruited biker gang members and drug traffickers, people who would never be flagged as foreign intelligence operatives. This is sophisticated work, and the agents who understood these networks, who knew the patterns and the players, were the ones Patel fired. And then there is what happened right after Operation Epic Fury started. A mass shooting occurred at a bar in downtown Austin, Texas. CBS News reported the shooter was wearing clothing that said "Property of Allah" beneath a design resembling the Iranian flag. The timing makes the point. You do not remove your Iran counterintelligence team during a military conflict with Iran. When you go to war, the domestic threat picture changes overnight, and the people trained to read that picture were sitting at home. These are the exact threats that CI-12 was built to counter, and those agents with their years of accumulated knowledge about Iranian networks are now gone. When they walked out the door, their institutional knowledge walked with them. As NBC News described it, the unit handled cases ranging from mishandling of classified documents to tracking foreign spies operating on U.S. soil. You cannot just train replacements for that kind of expertise in a few weeks. Representative Grace Meng, the ranking member of the House Appropriations Subcommittee on Commerce, Justice, and Science, sent a formal letter to Patel demanding he justify the CI-12 firings and provide information on staffing levels for counterintelligence teams since January of 2025. In her press release, Meng specifically cited concerns from national security analysts that Iranian sleeper cells could increase activity inside the United States in response to Operation Epic Fury. Patel's judgment has been questioned before, and not just over the firings. In September of 2025, during the investigation into an incident involving conservative commentator Charlie Kirk, Patel prematurely announced on social media that the FBI had detained a suspect. The information was wrong. He deleted the post a couple of hours later. According to Time magazine, Senator Dick Durbin said at an oversight hearing that Patel had been so anxious to take credit that he violated a basic principle of law enforcement, which is to stay quiet during critical stages of an active investigation. And just this month, The Atlantic published a lengthy investigation citing over 24 sources, including current and former FBI officials, alleging that Patel has been frequently unreachable and engaged in excessive drinking. NPR reported that staffers raised concerns that Patel's behavior posed real national security risks, given that the FBI director is responsible for signing off on FISA warrants that actively track suspected terrorists and making life-or-death decisions during emergencies like mass shootings. The report even described a request for breaching equipment, the kind used by SWAT teams, because Patel was allegedly unreachable behind locked doors on one occasion. On April 22, 2026, House Judiciary Democrats, led by Representative Jamie Raskin, formally launched an investigation into the allegations and demanded Patel submit to an alcohol abuse screening. Patel has denied everything. He is suing The Atlantic for $250 million. He has filed defamation lawsuits against commentators who criticized him, though one of those suits was just dismissed by a federal judge in Texas who ruled the comments amounted to rhetorical hyperbole rather than defamatory statements of fact. So, let me just lay this out plainly. The FBI director fired Iran experts days before a war with Iran. He admitted under oath that he knew the war was coming over a month in advance. He is a defendant in multiple federal lawsuits alleging a politically motivated purge. He prematurely named the wrong suspect in a high-profile investigation and deleted the post hours later. His own staff has reported concerns about chronic absenteeism and impairment to The Atlantic and the New York Times, and his former second-in-command put it in a court filing that Patel admitted the firings were about keeping his job. Meanwhile, the former attorney general is a co-defendant in those same lawsuits, dodged a bipartisan congressional subpoena over the Epstein files, and publicly promised on Fox News to root out people in the FBI who despise Donald Trump. And you have over 50 FBI employees who have been terminated since January of 2025, not for misconduct or policy violations, but for the perceived offense of having done their jobs on cases that happen to involve the President of the United States. The lawsuits are now the mechanism that could force accountability. In federal court, you cannot hide behind pending litigation because you are the litigation. You cannot recite statistics about arrest numbers when the judge wants to see your termination records. You cannot claim you do not remember who you fired when the discovery process produces the documentation. The fired agents are seeking reinstatement, amendment of their personnel records, and a court declaration that their constitutional rights were violated. If the class action certification is granted, it could open the door for every similarly fired agent to get their jobs back. But there is a question hanging over all of it that nobody can answer yet. Can these cases actually reach a verdict, or will a presidential pardon arrive before the gavel does? That is the real tension here, because the legal system can only work if it is allowed to. And the people accused of corrupting that system are the same people with the power to short-circuit it. We have seen it before. The moment a case gets close to something the White House does not want on record, the machinery kicks in. Witnesses refuse to cooperate, documents get classified, and pardons arrive just in time. But something is different this time. These are not politicians or political operatives filing these suits. These are career federal agents with 8 to 14 years of clean service records, performance reviews, and commendations. People who expected to retire from the FBI and got fired on Halloween instead. And they have been collecting documentation since the day they were walked out. The joint statement from Galliano, Tolman, and Ball, as reported by CBS News, said it plainly. Serving the American people as FBI agents was the highest honor of our lives. Our removal from federal service without due process and based on a false perception of political bias is a profound injustice. Nobody knows yet whether the courts will side with them. But for the first time, the people who were removed are fighting back in the one arena where talking points do not work and statistics cannot save you. The evidence will either prove the case or it will not. And that is what keeps Patel and Bondi's lawyers up at night. That is the story, not a left story. story, not a right story, an accountability story. And right now, the only place where accountability might actually happen is inside a federal courtroom in Washington, D.C. If this is the kind of reporting you want more of, subscribe to Crisis Desk. We cover the stories that matter with receipts. I will see you in the next one.